The 1920s was a decade that began on January 1st, 1920 and ended on December 31st, 1929. It is sometimes referred to as the Roaring Twenties, the Jazz Age, or the Golden Age 20s. This was caused by the booming economy in the US after World War I, and this was a time frame that would impact the United States from here on out. The radio was hugely popular in the 1920s, with roughly 3 million Americans owning radios by 1923. The appeal of hearing words and music anywhere attracted audiences and advertisers to use the radio and made it easier to receive news bulletins, advertisings, and music. By the time 1930 rolled around, roughly 60% of all Americans had purchased a radio. Advertising on the radio was not introduced until later in the 1920s, which drastically changed the face of the radio itself.
Pepsi Cola hits the spot, 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi Cola is the drink for you.
With no radio regulations, radio listeners and producers asked the government for some sort of intervention to end the free-for-all which the radio had become. The government responded slowly, gradually passing laws to govern the radio. In the end, the radio completely revolutionized the way that news, advertising, and music were received by the public, and made it faster and more convenient for everyone during the 1920s. The radio also helped bring forth the Jazz Age. Jazz played a significant part in cultural changes during the 1920s, and its influence on pop culture continued long afterwards. The birth of jazz music is often known to be started by African Americans, but was quickly moved and expanded to be loved by the rest of America. Cities like New York and Chicago were cultural centers for jazz, where the music grew more popular. Because of the invention of the radio, jazz music was able to be spread faster than ever before. This was due to the fact that Americans were able to listen to jazz without actually visiting a jazz club for themselves. The Jazz Age was also known for helping the development of the flappers. Flappers were young women who wanted to change the social norm of what was acceptable for women by their influence through society and clothing. Jazz music was the music of choice for the flappers. Jazz wasn't just simply a music phase, it also changed American society as a whole. The 1920s wasn't all about what you hear. There were many enhancements made on the film industry. The film industry really blossomed in the 1920s, expanding upon the foundations of films from earlier years. The greatest amount of films produced in the US occurred in the 1920s and 30s, averaging around 800 film releases in a year. Nowadays, it is remarkable when a production exceeds 500 films per year. Throughout most of the decade, silent films were the predominant product of the film industry. The idea of combining motion pictures with recorded sound is nearly as old as the film itself. Synchronizing dialogue was only made practical in the late 1920s. Before that, audio and video were both played separately and were matched up as best they could while playing in the theater. After the audio and video could be properly synced, the production of silent films nearly went extinct.
Cry, Tootsie, don't cry. Kiss me, Tootsie.
Films were becoming longer, costlier, and more polished. They were being manufactured in an assembly line style where production was broken down and organized into its various categories, like writing, costuming, makeup, directing, editing, and so on. The 1920s was a huge growth period for the film industry. The Roaring Twenties had a huge impact on America, a period of 10 years that forever changed America as we know it.